The Planning Commission meeting for City of Philomath for April 21st to order. I want to welcome everybody this evening. The main order of business this evening is the proposed 26 lot subdivision named Knoll Heights and a sensitive land permit for Hillside and Erosion control overlay. We're going to do a roll call. Go ahead and call a roll call.
If I can say everybody's names, let's have everybody introduce themselves. How about that? Including let's start with our city attorney online, and then we'll go around the room.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley DeGill from Berry, Elsner, and Hammond. I'm one of the city's city attorneys.
Planning Commissioner.
Darlene Rose, Planning Commission.
Timothy Malott, Planning Commission.
Josiah Jessen, Planning Commission.
Ms. Workman, City Manager.
Sarah Calder Mitchell, Planning Commission.
Van Hunsaker, Planning Commission.
Michael Bidwell, Planner.
Okay, the order of proceedings tonight is going to be a staff report, then public testimony, the commission questions of staff, commission deliberations, and then final recommendations. Are we going to hold to 3-minute testimony this evening?
You can go 5 minutes.
Okay, well, the testimony this evening will be limited to 5 minutes per individual. Persons testifying either orally or in writing may request a continuance or request the record be held open. These requests should be included in your testimony. Keep track of the requests of continuance of keeping the record open. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing and declaration of any conflicts of interest. I myself is going to have to recuse myself because I have been involved with the applicant in this project. I'm going to move it over to Josiah, and we'll see you later.
Okay. In that case, does anyone wish to declare any potential or actual conflicts of interest? All good. Does anyone wish to rebut these disclosures? No rebuttals. Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds, meaning that the Planning Commission not the appropriate body for this hearing? Okay. On to presentation. Decisions such as these under consideration this evening are evaluated against applicable statewide planning goals and guidelines and criteria from the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan as presented in the staff report. So we can now proceed.
The applicant is applying to subdivide the subject 6.95 acre property consisting of 3 parcels on the north terminus of 7th Street between Fawn Lane and Queglin Drive to 26 lots for single unit detached homes. Some of the parcels have slopes that exceed 20%, so the subdivision evaluation requires a sensitive lands permit for the purposes of establishing a hillside and erosion control overlay for mitigation of steep and or unstable slopes. A type B variance is also requested in consolidation with this application for the length of the cul-de-sac, which was required to be longer than otherwise allowed. The purpose of the hearing is to determine if the application conforms to the applicable criteria set forth in the Philomath Municipal Code. A review of the subdivision application by the City of Philomath and Philomath Fire District staff during the pre-application meeting indicated general compliance with the applicable standards, and the applicant was invited to make a formal application. Given this information in the preliminary plat, staff finds the application complies with the subdivision requirements and recommends approval of the preliminary plat for the subdivision, subject to certain conditions. The requested public hearing has been scheduled before the Planning Commission. Notice of the application and scheduled hearing was mailed to owners of properties located within 250 feet of the subject property to affected agencies and utilities and posted on the property as required in the development code. The purpose of the hearing is to provide the public an opportunity to raise objections to or support for the analysis of the application found within the staff report and the commission to determine if the application in fact conforms to the applicable standards set forth in the Philomath Municipal Code or can be made to conform to specific conditions of approval. I will not go through all of the findings of fact, but I do want to point out the two ones that have changed or have been added. The application complies with the applicable general requirements listed in PMC 18.115.020, which also covers ORS 92, the standards for subdivisions. A type B variance is required for the length of the cul-de-sac, approximately 900 linear feet, compared to the Public Works design standards of no more than 600 linear feet. The review is consolidated into the proceedings for the subdivision approval. At last check, which I checked voicemail and email, I have not received any public comments by either of those modes at the time of this meeting. Comments were received from Philomath Fire and Rescue and Philomath Public Works and the City Engineer of Record and have been incorporated into the staff report. Next, I will go through what are the criteria and then summarize the findings of these criteria. 18.115.050 approval criteria for a preliminary plat. General approval criteria. The city may approve with conditions or deny a preliminary plat based on the following approval criteria. The proposed preliminary plat complies with all the applicable development code sections and other applicable ordinances and regulations. At a minimum, the provisions of this chapter and the applicable sections of Chapter 18.30 of the PMC, Land Use District Administration, and Chapter 18.60 PMC, Design Standards Administration, shall apply. The part that's changed is a variance is required for the length of the cul-de-sac off Pioneer Street. Per Public Works design standards, any dead-end street that exceeds 600 feet requires a Type B variance. The variance application was submitted and the review is included in the staff report, which is modified from the one that was posted after this was found out. The proceedings have been consolidated with the subdivision application review. And all the criteria have been met pending the approval of the variance. The plat name is not already recorded for another subdivision. This did provide the approval from Benton County for the name of the subdivision, so this criteria was met. The proposed streets, roads, sidewalks, bicycle lanes, pathways, utilities, and surface water management facilities are laid out so as to conform or transition to the plats of subdivisions and maps of major partitions already approved for adjoining property as to width, general direction, and in all other respects. All proposed public improvements and dedications are identified on the preliminary plat. And then I'll just address the part that's different. The development code requires connectivity to the nearest pedestrian amenity, typically sidewalks. There are no sidewalks on North 7th Street between Pioneer and the subject property, a length of approximately 560 feet. With only 11 houses in the cul-de-sac, requiring off-site sidewalk improvements from the development to Pioneer Street is not proportional to the size of the development. As a condition of approval, in lieu of providing pedestrian connectivity, the applicant shall provide a payment of $28,000, which will be used by the city for signage and road markings to notify drivers of pedestrians on the roadway, which shall be installed at the time of development and future sidewalk installation at the time all of North 7th is improved with sidewalks. And let's see. And okay, now I can go on to that. All proposed private common areas and improvements, for example, homeowner association property, are identified on the preliminary plat. They did identify the common lot, which is going to be used for stormwater mitigation, and that was provided, and everything else is showing what's there, what's not there, and the removal of non-native species off the property. So this criterion is found to be met. Housing density. The subdivision meets all city housing standards of Division 2. The average lot size of the proposed lots is 9,201 square feet. Even though some of the lots are over 10,000 feet, part of this is because of significant slopes exceeding 20%, or exceeding 30%, and for the preservation of significant trees. this criteria is found to be met. Further analysis of the Hillside erosion control overlay will be later on in my presentation. Blocks and lot standards. All proposed blocks, lots, and parcels conform to the specific requirements below. All lots shall comply with the lot area setback and dimensional requirements of the applicable land use district and the standards of Chapter 3.1, Section 2J, street connectivity and formation of blocks. Setback shall be as required by the applicable land use district. Each lot shall conform to the standards of Chapter 3.1, access and circulation. Landscape or other screening may be required to maintain privacy for abutting uses. In conformance with the Uniform Fire Code, the fire apparatus access drive shall be provided to serve all portions of a building that are located more than 150 feet from a public right-of-way or access drive. See also Chapter 3.1, access and circulation. Where a common drive is to be provided to serve more than one lot, a reciprocal easement that will ensure access and maintenance rights shall be recorded with the approved subdivision. Each of these criteria are found to be met or can be met with recommended conditions of approval. In this next section, I'm going to cover the specific criteria for the variance that is required for the subdivision. The purpose of this chapter is to provide flexibility to development standards in recognition of the complexity and wide variation of site development opportunities and constraints. The variance procedures are intended to provide flexibility while ensuring that the purpose of each development standard is met. B variances. Due to the discretionary nature, the following types of variances shall be reviewed using a Type 2 procedure in accordance with Chapter 18.105 of the PMC. The specific variance that this one's applying for is variances to transportation improvement requirements from PMC 18.80-020. The city may approve with conditions, or deny variance to transportation improvement standards of PMC 18.80-020 after finding compliance with criteria set in subsections A6A through D of the section. When the variance request cannot meet these criteria, then the request shall be reviewed as a Class C variance. And there are 4 criteria for this one. 1, there is a significant constraint presented by existing topography, physical and environmental conditions, right-of-way, development, and or legal agreements. 2, there are opportunities identified for implementing innovative transportation treatments. 3, the variance meets the intent of the transportation improvement standards. And 4, the requested variance will not compromise safety nor adversely impact other properties. So what had happened originally for the subdivision, the applicant had 7th Street connecting to Northernwood Drive. The challenge is the public work design standards in the Oregon Fire Code on slope of streets. They cannot exceed 12%. It was deemed that they cannot provide a street that would meet those criteria. So the city requested the city engineer and the fire chief to terminate 7th Street versus building up the building. So this created the situation that required the variance. That was not the applicant's fault, but a requirement by the city. While there could be some ways to deal with innovative transportation solutions to connect the upper portion equivalent to 7th Street, the only places they would be able to do it is where the stormwater infrastructure is going to be, and the city engineer does not want any pathways, bicycle paths, or stairs on that in case of stormwater repairs need to be done. And also any slope would be very steep where they're going to have the stormwater infrastructure, so it would make it not ADA compliant and not safe. And so with the intent of the transportation improvements, while it terminates at a dead end, fire department says there's going to be no issues for life safety because they'll be able to turn around the cul-de-sac. And of all of the options, this was the safest and most reasonable option that was available, and that the fire chief is in support of the variance, and the city engineer and public works is in support. So based on all of those criteria, and that they have been denied an opportunity to provide innovative solutions for the transportation gap, it is found to be in conformance with the variance standards. Now go on to the design standards review. All developments within the city must comply with provisions of chapters 18.60 through 18.90 of the PMC. Some developments, such as major projects requiring land division and or site design review approval, may require detailed findings demonstrating compliance with each chapter of the code. For smaller, less complex projects, fewer code provisions may apply. The following design standards apply throughout the city for all land use types. Chapter 18.65 is access and circulation. Option F is the access options. When vehicle access is required for development, access shall be provided by one of the following methods. A minimum of 10 feet per lane is required. These methods are options to the developer subdivider, unless one method is specifically required by Division 2. This method is required in this instance. So the southern part of the subdivision will connect with 7th Street, and then the upper part is going to connect Fawn Lane to Quail Glen Drive. So based on this, there's one other thing that I did see that may be, and the other part that was not showing that could be addressed at the pre-design meeting. So based on that, the criteria is found to be met or can be met with conditions. Access spacing. Driveway accesses shall be separated from street intersections in accordance with the following standards and requirements. A minimum of, for local street, a minimum of 35 feet separation as measured from the sides of the driveway to a parallel street shall be required. The only issue that I found was the location of the driveway in the proposed subdivision where they do the layout. That the lot 3 would be best shifted to the west side of the lot since it's approaching a T intersection on that part at Quail Glen. So as long as lot 3's driveway shifted to the west side of the lot versus the east side of the lot, the criterion is found to be met with the condition of approval listed above. Street connectivity and formation of blocks required. In order to promote efficient vehicular and pedestrian circulation throughout the city, land divisions and large site developments shall produce complete blocks bound by a connecting network of public and or private streets, bicycle or pedestrian pathways in accordance to the following standards. Block length and perimeter. The maximum block length and perimeter shall not exceed 600 feet length and 1,600 feet perimeter in a residential district. Besides the off-site dead-end street that was addressed in the variance evaluation, this proposed subdivision is found to meet the requirements listed here. Pedestrian access and circulation. To ensure safe, direct, and convenient pedestrian circulation, all developments except single-family detached housing, i.e. on individual lots, shall provide a continuous pedestrian and or multi-use. The site plan shows sidewalks on both sides of the street in the subdivision and on the proposed local street. Street lights will be installed along off-site sidewalks and pedestrian paths in conjunction with sidewalk development where such lights do not already exist. The criterion is found to be met with the conditions above. Landscaping and street trees. The applicant did provide a landscaping tree plan because they had to for the Hillside Erosion Control Overlay, showing what significant trees are being preserved, what native grasses be preserved, and then what invasive species are being removed from the site. The applicant will need to remove trees that are in the way of the proposed stormwater channels in the landscape plan. That was the only item found that needs addressing, and that'll be added as a condition of approval when they submit a formal landscape plan. Protection standards. All of the following protection standards shall apply to significant vegetation areas. Significant trees identified as meeting the criteria in section B1 shall be retained whenever practical. Preservation may become impractical when it would prevent reasonable development of public streets, utilities, or land uses permitted in the applicable land use district. And they did provide a detailed plan that showed the significant trees and grasses that will be preserved on the slopes and the area that would be constrained and no building would be allowed outside of the grading that would be required for utilities and streets. So this criterion was found to be met. Public facilities standards. Transportation improvements. No development shall occur unless the development has frontage or approved access to a public street in conformance with the provisions in Chapter 18.65 of PMC, and new streets and drives shall be paved. The criterion was found to be met. No street name shall be used which will duplicate or be confused with the names of existing streets in Benton County, except for extensions of existing streets. Street names, signs, and numbers shall conform to the established pattern in the surrounding area, except as requested by emergency service providers. The only item that will still need to be addressed is that the application does not name the local street next to the development line. As a condition of approval they shall submit a revised site plan that will show the name of the new street coming off from the north to Wellwood Drive. So outside of that, the criterion is found to be met given the condition of approval listed above. Street signs. Street signs shall be installed according to the applicable city, county, or state standards with jurisdiction for traffic control and street names. The cost of signs required for the new development shall be the responsibility of the developer. Street name signs shall be installed at all street intersections. Stop signs and other signs may be required, and the criteria was found to be met. And mailboxes, there will be plans for mailboxes to be used shall be approved by the United States Postal Service. Where mailboxes are installed in the sidewalk, a radius shall be provided around the structure to maintain minimum sidewalk width. The condition of approval will be the final plat shall indicate where CBU mailboxes per city and postal service requirement will be installed by the developer. The criterion is found to be met given the condition of approval. For sanitary, sewer, and water improvements, storm water, and utilities, at the time that this was annexed, the evaluation of water, how much water and sewer service was that evaluation done at that time, and because it was annexed and approved at that time, meant that there was enough water and sewer capacity and stormwater capacity to be able to do this. The proposal can be met with and specific location of the infrastructure and whatnot could be at the pre-design meeting, but with what was proposed and shown, it would be able to service water, stormwater, and sewer for that subdivision and not impact neighboring subdivisions. So that criteria was found to be. Now we're gonna.
Mike, go ahead and read that second to last paragraph on there, just to give a summary of the Public Works comments.
Second to last paragraph.
Under 1880-040.
Or say that again.
It's bottom of page 12.
On page 12. Okay, so the city engineer has noted the following informational regarding public works standards that will be required if the subdivision application is approved. These are not conditions of approval, but items the applicant should be aware of as this project moves forward towards the construction phase. And they list out a more detailed analysis in the staff report, your sanitary sewer, water, stormwater, existing water lines, etc. Make sure there's nothing else I need to read.
I think the engineer's comments go all the way to there's 40 something of them. 47.
Do you want me to read all of that or just?
It's just comments from the engineer. Again, they're not conditions of approval. They're kind of a road moving forward, so the developer's aware it's going to be required when we go to pre-engineering. And then there are conditions of the approval for the preliminary plat plan. So it's a good indication that the engineer wants the developer to know about, but they're not, for the most part, they're not relevant to the development itself. It's a preliminary plat plan for subdivision. A lot of detail about water and sewer and storm and street that we'll go through. The engineers will talk about when, as far as the land use approval, it's not applicable.
Okay, and then now we jump into the Hillside and Erosion Control Overlay Permit, and I'll go over the criteria that had to be evaluated. The purpose of this overlay district is to promote the public health, safety, water quality, and general welfare. Provisions under this section are the ones that restrict or prohibit uses, activities, or development which is damage prone or damage inducing to land and or the water quality. Requires use vulnerable to landslides, including public facilities which serve such uses, to be protected at the time of initial construction. Allows the development of land use for those uses which are suitable on steep slope. Maintain land and water flow by minimizing erosion and sedimentation, and by restricting or prohibiting development, excavation, and vegetation removal in areas with constrained or steep slopes. Comply with statewide planning goal 6, air, water, and land resources quality, and 7, natural hazards. Areas of application. The hillside and erosion control overlay shall apply to land on slopes 20% or greater. The delineation of boundaries. The hillside and erosion control overlay district shall be mapped generally by the city of Philomath and shall consist of steep slope and constrained slope areas. Steep slopes areas include all areas in the city of Philomath where the slope of the land is 30% or greater. Constrained slope area includes all areas where the slope of the land is between 20 and 30%. Specific determination of steep slope and constrained slope areas shall be made at the time of a development proposal by the applicant for alteration or redevelopment for the respective properties within the hillside and erosion control overlay district based on topographic map and field survey. Areas subject to restrictions and prohibitions of this overlay district are generally indicated on a map entitled City of Philomath Slope Map on file with the City of Philomath. Where development, excavation, or vegetation removal is proposed for areas with 20% or greater slope, a licensed land surveyor shall prepare an on-the-ground topographical survey for the entire site. The survey shall show trees or tree clusters, and 2-foot contours shall be provided by the property owner or applicant for development approval. Areas with constrained slopes and areas with steep slopes shall be specifically indicated on the survey maps. Warning and disclaimer of liability. The degree of landslide protection required by this title is considered reasonable for regulatory purposes and is based on common engineering and scientific practices. Landslides may occur on rare occasions in areas outside of the delineated steep slope and constrained slope boundaries. This title does not imply that areas outside the hillside and erosion overlay district boundaries or land use permitted within such boundaries will be free from significant mass movement or landslide damage. This section shall not create City of Philomath liability for damage resulting from reliance on the provisions of the section or administrative decision lawfully made thereunder. And they did provide a topographical survey of the slopes, and they showed what was above 20, which was about 30. The parts where and for steep slopes and digging that is allowed is anything to reasonably allow infrastructure like utilities, the frontage streets to meet the grades of public works design standards and fire requirements. So those things are excluded if that is required by the city or the fire district to provide utilities. Significant trees that will be preserved on steep slopes was indicated in their packet for anything with the steep slopes analysis that was done by a licensed engineer. They had a soils report and geotech report with it to show that the land is capable of being able to keep houses and not have them slide off the hill. But anything that's in the 20-30% that is there are limitations on how much permeable surface can be done, and some of that gets flushed out in the pre-design meeting if retaining walls are needed, like around houses that are going to have split basements and things like that. 18.85.030 uses. Uses allowed steep slope. Open space and trails provided that they are constructed consistent with the standards on file with the City of Philomath. Removal of refuse and unauthorized fill. Removal of nuisance or invasive plant species or planting of approved vegetation species on the native plant list kept at file with the City of Philomath. Removal of dead or dying trees that are imminent danger to public safety as determined by the planning official. Construction of roads designated in the transportation system plan and public utilities necessary to support permitted development on slopes of 20% or less, subject to construction standards on file at the City of Philomath. Expansion of existing roadways and public utility facilities necessary to support permitted development on slopes 20% or less, subject to construction standards on file at the City of Philomath. Prohibited uses. Prohibited uses on slopes 30% or greater unless specifically permitted under 1885.040. Man-made structures except as described in PMC 18.85.040 C4. Vegetation removed not specifically allowed under subsection A of the section. Road construction not specifically allowed under subsection A of the section. And excavation. Uses allowed on constrained slope. Open spaces. Any use in the underlying district provide the standards of PMC 18.85.040 are met. Removal of nuisance or invasive plant species or planting of approved vegetation species on the native plant list and kept on file with the city of Philomath. And I kind of jumped ahead and actually explained the part that I should have said after reading this, but I stated that before, so I won't regurgitate that here. And then the next section is the Hillside Development Standards 18.85.040. The property shall have access to a public street. All streets shall be built to a width and street improvement standard acceptable to the city of Philomath. The parcel can be adequately served by city water supply and sanitary sewer systems or meets applicable state standards for individual sewage disposal systems. And it was determined that all of these criteria were applied to and meets the criteria. Where slopes are 30% or greater, grading, approved vegetation removal, site preparation, and construction shall be prohibited except where necessary to provide access to utilities to buildable lots with slopes 30% or less. Lands with slopes of 30% or greater shall be conserved and maintained as open space. This may occur through private ownership, through private conditions, covenants, and restrictions, through conservation easements enforceable by the city of Philomath or other public or private nonprofit agency, or where approved by the city, dedication to the city of Philomath, or donation to the appropriate public or private nonprofit agency. And they showed the areas that have that after grading for utility or any required utilities and street that will have existing trees that are exceeding 30%. So that was provided to us and does meet the standard. Disturbed areas shall be replanted and approved native vegetation and tree covering by October 15th, following any disturbance regulated in this title. According to the plants report or vegetation study that was provided, it talked about that the plantings of native grasses need to happen after the first rain of the rainy season. So it'll be recommended and encouraged that they adhere to the findings in the vegetation study for planting to make sure that those can properly root and establish themselves. Where development is proposed on slopes 20% or greater, the impervious surface of any residential lot or commercial or industrial site, including driveways, sidewalks, structures, swimming pools, and any other area not covered by vegetation, shall not exceed 30% of the constrained slope area. Development shall not result in cuts or fills in excess of 3 feet, except for basement construction, unless specifically approved by the planning official. At least half of the constrained slope area shall remain in or be planted in approved native vegetation. The existing tree canopy shall be retained where possible and shall be considered in meeting the standard. If development is proposed on constrained or steep slope areas, a mitigation plan for disturbed areas on constrained or steep slopes shall be prepared and implemented. This plan shall provide for the replanting and maintenance of approved native plant species designed to achieve pre-disturbance conditions. And with everything they submitted, they show conformance to these requirements. The applicant's engineer shall provide a construction erosion control plan and water quality plan consistent with the provisions of this title and consistent with state or federal stormwater control programs. The applicant's engineering plan shall certify that runoff and sedimentation from the site will not be greater than the conditions present on the site as of the effective date of the ordinance codified in this chapter. Per the city engineer, the applicant shall submit a construction control plan and water quality plan with provisions of this title that's consistent with state, federal, and stormwater control programs. And that will be discussed further to flush out, since Benton County will also have some stormwater requirements based on the site that goes beyond Philomath Development Code and Public Work Design.
Section B is kind of lengthy. Do you want to just give a quick summary of that?
Oh, just a quick summary of that.
Just hit the titles and then go through.
And the applicant provided a hydrology geology report, a soil report showing the type of soil, how far down is bedrock, things like that. They provided a grading plan pre and post, showing what would need to be graded for utilities, and then also proposed retaining walls in some of the lots that had to be graded more to put the utilities in to ensure stability of each of the lots that required retaining walls. They provided us a vegetation report and then design standards of what they're doing with their trees and what in that area that exceeds 30%. And so all that the The condition will be added that the applicant shall comply with the recommended of the drainage analysis that was included in the geotechnical report to access runoff and sedimentation. That was the only comment that the city engineer had on that. Residential density allowances and transfer. There are several criteria, but they did not opt for a density bonus requirement. So overall, the subdivision complies with all the standards and meets within the boundaries of the allowances above. Excuse me. Approval procedure for this one is a type 3 because it's more than one unit. The planning commission may approve new developments for more than one single family or two family dwelling within the Hillside and Erosion Control Overlay District under a type 3 procedure, provided that the proposed use or structure meets all of these conditions. Development standards are met as prescribed under 18.85.040. Adequate protection is utilized to minimize landslide and erosion hazards consistent with this title. And based on the evaluation above and looking through the reports and also the city engineer looking at those reports, the proposed subdivision with protection of some of the protected species, trees and plants and slopes appears to comply with all the standards above. The conclusion is the proposed preliminary plat complies with all of the applicable development code sections or can be made through reasonable conditions and other applicable ordinances and regulations and complies with this criterion. And we ended up providing a list of conditions of approval. I'm only going to focus on two of them because one changed after discussion with the applicant, and then the other one was a housekeeping one that didn't get added to the conditions but was listed in the original staff report. In lieu of providing pedestrian connectivity, the applicant shall provide a payment of $28,000, which will be used by the city for signage and road markings to notify drivers of pedestrians on the roadway, which shall be installed at the time of development, and future sidewalk installation at the time all of North 7th Street is improved with sidewalks. The final plat shall indicate where CBU mailboxes for city and postal service standards and CBU access will be installed. And the recommendations are as follows. To approve the subdivision subject to the recommended conditions of approval, the motion would be I move to approve the application for the Newell Heights subdivision PC 25.01 or -01 and the type B variance for the length of the cul-de-sac length P25-02 and the Hillside Erosion Control Overlay Special Lands Permit PC 25-02 based on the findings of fact and conditions of approval as contained in the staff report dated April 21st, 2025. Or to deny the subdivision, I move to amend the findings of fact for the Newell Heights subdivision as follows, listing the specific reason of denial. And with that, I will open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. Tim left, so now. Does any commissioner need to disclose any ex parte contact, site visits, or?
I went to the site today. And
Okay, any comment from city attorney?
No comment. Do you still feel that you can proceed with reviewing this application impartially?
yes.
Perfect.
Okay, at this time, we'll move to preliminary questions of staff. Keep in mind there will be an opportunity for, so we'll go into the commission's questions for staff, and then we'll go into the public hearing. We'll close the public hearing, and we'll have more time for the commission to ask questions of the staff and the public, and then we'll deliberate and come to our conclusion or recommendation. So this time, does anybody have any preliminary questions for staff?
Just be prepared for like clarifying questions of the staff report more than anything. So if there's something here that stood out to you or didn't make sense, you need some clarification of, or you want Michael to speak a little bit more too, or really just for like clarifying type questions with regard to the staff report.
Can you explain the reason for the 600 feet standard of the cul-de-sacs?
That was something, so in the Public Works Design Standards, it lists that for a dead-end street, it gives the discretion of the Public Works Director can approve from anything exceeding 325 feet, but not exceeding 600 feet. And so when it goes beyond 600 feet, then in the development code, it lists that those would require a variance if it exceeds 600 feet. So this is all kind of tied into the Public Works design standards and trying to synthesize that with the development code, so there's not any discongruences from the two.
Speak over.
No, go ahead.
Kind of big picture, and that's exactly right. It's in the design center. Big picture, when you're looking at transportation, especially in local streets, there's a best practice to try to encourage connectivity. And the best way to do that is like a grid system where you've got multiple ways to get in and out of the street and all off the street. That helps spread that out a little bit more so you don't have a really heavy impact on any one portion of that neighborhood. And if you have a lot of very long cul-de-sacs, if you imagine all of that traffic that has to funnel back down that street, and those houses on the corner are going to get the brunt of the traffic impact because there's only one way in or out. And so the development code is written in such a way that it kind of encourages that connectivity through a grid system by discouraging cul-de-sacs almost entirely, but especially when they get a lot longer and you have a lot more homes taking entrance and egress in front of those corner lots. So that's kind of the general philosophy on the planning level. And the 300 foot to 600 foot or 700 foot, I mean, you draw a line somewhere and figure, this amount of traffic is about normal in a city block of what would go one way or the other. Anything more than that, you're kind of putting a little bit more undue traffic in front of individual residences inside of a local street.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of questions, so I'll kind of limit this to a couple. Anybody else want to go first? Anybody else have any other questions? Okay. Ben, I'm sure you got some.
Oh, well,
So remember, we can ask our own questions to the staff after the public hearing, so.
yeah, I'm good for now.
Okay. So, with in mind that, the public is gonna speak next, I have a question on,
We have
Page-
the applicant next to the public.
the applicant, yeah, thank you. On page 4, the section that was, new section that's included, it's also part of the recommended conditions of approval. This $28,000 number in lieu of improving sidewalks all the way down 7th Street. How did the city arrive at that number?
I will defer to Chris on this one.
That's, we got an estimate from a couple local one local contractor specifically. Right now, concrete's going about $5 a square foot. We got 600 and, what was the number, 560 feet, linear feet there, 5 foot wide sidewalks. So that would be essentially the cost of doing the sidewalks, which is the letter of the code, right? The code says that the development's responsible for that pedestrian connectivity. But there's state code that says it's gotta be proportional to the size of the development, right? If this was just one house going in, you wouldn't ever think to make them put on, 650 or 560 feet of sidewalk off of their property to connect to an existing sidewalk. So in this case, it's 11 houses on the cul-de-sac. There's 13 houses south of them between the end of this cul-de-sac, the southern end, and Pioneer Street. I would argue that those property owners have some responsibility for sidewalks on their streets as well. It's just not ready to develop yet. And so, to hold them to essentially what it's trying to do, which is that pedestrian connectivity, I just looked at, what felt fair and seemed fair. We don't really have great precedents for this. But a payment in lieu of allows the developer to make a financial contribution towards putting some signage out there. I would envision some signage at Pioneer, says like pedestrians on the roadway, bicycles on the roadway, maybe some share rows that have like the bicycle stencil that goes on the road. We would put some of those on there as well, just to raise awareness that there's pedestrian bicycles on that local street, which all local streets have, but we would add some awareness, and then we would have some money set aside if the city were to prioritize North 7th Street to put sidewalks maybe on both sides or one side, Then we'd have some seed money to help pay for some of that engineering and some of that initial sidewalk work to be done. By no means would that be enough money to do all of the engineering for the street. You have to engineer the street first because you have to know where the sidewalk's gonna go. So there's a fairly large expense just to do the engineering, and then the expense for the material, and then the expense for the labor as well, is gonna be significantly more than that, maybe 3 times that amount. But for the sidewalk, again, felt like a pretty fair, proportional amount that the developer could come up with. And that wasn't a number I negotiated with the developer. We might hear from the developer on that number, but from the city's perspective, I felt like that's a pretty fair number to come at for the cost of the material to put in the sidewalk, which will prevent some safety issues today and some seed money for your sidewalks in the future.
And I'm gonna piggyback off that because the original condition listed that the applicant shall provide the design and sidewalk improvements from the end of that subdivision down the Pioneer. And it was based on those discussions, and I was out on bereavement leave when those discussions happened, where they said that this doesn't seem to be fair with the scope of the number of lots that are gonna be accessing this, that seemed unreasonable. And so this is after Chris's meeting with that was kind of the alternative to try to find that fair balance, satisfy all parties concerned.
Thank you.
Reasonable, just disproportionate. I mean, I see the reason in requiring the whole bit, because that's what the code says. It's just disproportionate to the number of houses going in.
There's not storm drainage there either, is there?
There's not, that was the other add, if they're gonna put the sidewalk on there and create a curb, now you gotta put all the storm improvement in there as well, and you add that, and if you're gonna do storm, so, yeah, there's a continuation of additional costs that you go down that road if we're gonna require sidewalk and curb, and,
I just want to make sure that was said.
good point, thank you.
And then the only other question I have at this time, the first recommended condition of approval states the preliminary approval shall be effective for a period of 2 years from the date of decision, after which time their approval automatically expires, but the approving authority may extend the preliminary approval for 1 additional year upon receipt of a written request for an extension. This 2 years, does that apply to both phases of development, or is that just the first phase?
Yeah, and with the way, I mean, they have showing their phasing, but it sounds like that's gonna be done within the 2 years. So that's why we kind of listed
Both
that.
phases are planned to be completed within.
That was my understanding of that, and then I could be corrected when the applicant comes up to speak. But what we do, let's say it really is 2 phases, we find out it's 2 phases, then we would want to do a modification at that point, and then separate that out with a timeline. But this is the general language for any subdivision around the state, that they have 2 years to complete it, and then if they need an extension, they have to show substantial effort of completion or some other like market calamity to be able to get the extension.
That was another question I had. Is it 2 years for completion, or, substantial completion and it can break around in 2 years?
Yeah, and so with the 2 years, once they have everything set, then next step would be getting the final plat, getting that approval, and it's just making sure we get to that final plat stage within 2 years is kind of the regulations regarding subdivisions.
Is there any other questions for staff this time? Good. Okay, we will now move to public testimony. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a speaker.
Yeah, that's missing.
Yeah, how about we skip that? We skipped over it. We should probably let the applicant provide testimony, so let's do that first, then we'll go to public testimony.
Yeah, both let the applicant provide testimony.
Just to remind you, Linda, the microphone's in the ceiling, so even though it feels very friendly, if you can project a little bit so we make sure the microphone picks it up. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to introduce Susanna Noel. She is here representing Northernwood LLC. And my name is Linda Howard. I'm with Devco Engineering, and also with us tonight is Trevor Burnell. He is a civil engineer for Devco Engineering. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. With that, Susanna has a few things she'd like to say, and then when she's done, we'll continue on with the rest of it.
My name is Susanna Noel. You might know me as Susie. First of all, thank you all very much for spending your evening helping make sure that Paloma stays the great town we all love. I grew up in this area, and I very much value the small town feel, and it makes Paloma unique. My brothers and I want to become homeowners in Plymouth, but sadly, there are not a lot of houses available in town here that can be purchased as a starter home. I'm sure you know what it's like to try to buy a house in our town. I'm currently renting a house on 9th Street, and my brother Abe over there is renting a house on 10th Street in Plymouth. And since we couldn't find anything, we decided to develop a spot for ourselves and other people in the community who want to raise a family, retire. I spent some evenings and nap times getting my developer's license and found a nice area that we believe will enhance the livability of the city when you allow people to build their homes here. Additionally, it will generate over $750,000 in SDC fees that will help the city to maintain and develop water, transportation, parks, other critical infrastructure. And then it will also generate approximately $2 million in property taxes over the next 10 years. So that's where we're here. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for considering this.
I'll continue on with the more technical part. I'd like to just briefly go over a couple of the highlights from Michael's staff report, and then we'd like to respond to the conditions of approval a little more specifically after that. So the application packet has addressed the criteria for the Hillside Erosion Control Overlay of the PMC, and all the criteria were met. The applicant has shown adherence to and intends to comply with the provisions of the underlying land use district, Division 2, and the design standards of Division 3. Originally, no variances were requested with the application, but with city's guidance, there's a type B variance for the length of this cul-de-sac was added, and the applicant concurs, thinking that that is necessary due to the terrain constraints preventing a northerly extension of 7th Street, making it technically impossible to design and install a city street which meets the city design standards. City utilities are adjacent to the project site and will be extended into and through the site. Access requirements to the development site are met. The applicant intends to include the design and construction information for access to the 2 lots at the south end of the new 7th Street extension, which are house numbers 405 and 413 on North 7th Street. The access points into these lots will be shown on the public improvement drawings for review and approval by city staff, and the applicant will coordinate with the owners of these 2 lots as to the exact location for those lot access points. It's okay. I have a little sketch here I'd like to share to kind of help show what I'm going to discuss next. Simplistic sketch that we put together as a pictorial response. The staff report addresses the lack of access to the tax lot adjacent to this project to the west, which is tax lot 400. It is suggested, or was suggested, that a potential location for a public street stub to the west to this tax lot go through the proposed subdivision. While this option may be feasible, we suggest that access to tax lot 400 can be achieved by widening the existing access to tax lot 2000, which is just to the south of tax lot 400. And coincidentally, these 2 tax lots are owned by the same family, same person. With the agreement of participation in widening that access point, by the owner of tax lot 1900, which is the one at 7th Street, if required. Or we've also discussed the possibility of moving A of the subdivision slightly to the north to give additional width to create that 26-foot wide access. While this project did not create the landlocked situation of tax lot 400, it is the intent of the applicant to participate and refine access and utility connection options to tax lot 400, which will be included in the subsequent drawing sets submitted to the city. We will relocate the driveway location for lot 3, as Michael suggested in the staff report. As stated in the staff report, it is feasible for the site to be served by all city utilities, and those utilities will be designed by the engineering team and submitted to the city staff for review and approval. His team will coordinate the location and design of mailbox facilities for city and postal service standards. The location and design information for the mailbox facility will be shown on the public improvement drawings. In the phasing and time frame section of the staff report, the project lots will be developed in 2 phases, northern phase, southern phase, but the utility infrastructure will be constructed as one whole system to serve both phase 1 and phase 2. Under the site layout grading section, the applicant will fully address all the recommendations of the geotechnical report and show grading for public infrastructure and for the site as a whole, in combination with any needed review systems. And acknowledges the information supplied in the Hillside and Erosion Control Overlay section and will comply with the code regulations and design standards. Particular attention will be paid to the steep and constrained slopes areas when preparing plans for future building permit applications. In combination with consideration for potential development on steep slope areas, the applicant has provided a vegetation study which shows areas within the project site which are intended to have no impact, thus preserving the existing vegetation as much as practicable. Along with these vegetation preservation efforts, the applicant intends to provide new street trees and augmentation of any steeply sloped areas with new vegetation for the vegetation study recommendation. We'd like to, as quickly as I can, I'll address some of the conditions of approval. Condition 1, the applicant does understand the approval timeline and the process for acquiring an extension if necessary. Final plat will comply with all plat standards and monuments will be set. The applicant concurs and will provide payment and information for items listed in condition number 3. Utility easements along all rights of way will be increased to 8 feet wide, as from the 7 that was shown in the original application. The applicant concurs and will ensure that all improvements will conform with all city requirements and standards. The applicant will complete the process to provide a name for the new local street within this development site. No work will commence without without city being notified that such work is going to occur. And let's see, improvements constructed and the inspection of the city public will be conducted. And all public improvements will be installed and dedicated to the city prior to the final plat. Franchise utilities will be installed for the development site, and the accompanying easements will be shown on the final plat. The applicant understands that they will be responsible for expenses of installing the public infrastructure and utility systems needed to serve the development site. Where required, utilities will be installed underground. It is the intent of the applicant to install power, telephone, cable, and natural gas, making these services available to each new lot. Number 15, public infrastructure as-built drawings will be provided to the city. The applicant concurs and will provide an updated landscape street tree plan meeting the requirements of that condition of approval. Driveway and parking services will be asphalt. the driveway for lot 3 will be moved. The applicant concurs with and will install street signs and street lighting as approved by city staff. And then, condition number 20, which, directs us to about the sidewalk on 7th Street, between the sidewalk and Pioneer. After discussions with city manager and public works director regarding this condition, the applicant and the city staff have agreed to pursue deferring the improvements on North 7th Street to a future date when such improvements may be warranted. The applicant agrees to enter into an agreement with the city to calculate a fair proportional fee, which the applicant will pay to the city to participate in the future improvements. City staff has done that and given that to you with their revised staff report tonight. Condition 21, the applicant will provide a landscape, maintenance, and operational plan for the area identified as Tract A, the stormwater facility, city review and approval. The applicant concurs and accepts the city request for the type B variance for the length of the cul-de-sac street. And I guess I would like to just mention that also after discussions with the city manager and the public works director, it was determined that there is a path forward in addressing the suitability of the existing sanitary line in North 7th Street, as is briefly mentioned in the engineer's report. So all of that information and recommendations from the city engineer is acknowledged by the applicant. And all of those comments will be part of any discussions in the pre-engineering design meeting as some of the next step. Presentation.
Thank you. So now, are there any questions from the planning commission?
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead.
There's actually different numbers presented in different places. But regarding the extension of 7th Street, there's discussion over 12%, and then we have in this document here talks about you can have it over 20%. So I guess I'd like to know what the grade is, whatever percent it is,
As designed.
as it is right now.
Oh, existing slope?
Yeah.
Do we have that information, Charlie?
That was in their application, Van.
Yeah. Do you recall what the existing slope is for the area where 7th Street is?
I mean, okay, my point is you use the term over 12%, but it can be over 20% that the city allows. So I want to know why that's not, why it's been, you determined that wasn't allowable.
Comment from city staff that was recommended
Okay.
to keep
City
it
staff.
12% or less.
Okay.
And I think that's mostly for fire access. They prefer a grade of 12% or less.
So our regulations are wrong, right?
So I think the distinction is the road can't be more than 12%, but the lots that are being built on can be the 20%. So it's,
No, it's all right. We'll talk about it when we have our conversation.
But like on the road part, I'll answer that. State fire code requires no more than 12% grade on any street or fire lane. The fire apparatus can go up.
So that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
our code is wrong. That's all.
Yeah, and I think in the updates, we need to make that more consistent with that, because in the Public Works design standards, it also limits it as 12, and I had to make sure that the Public Works and the fire code match the same, and that was things that got discussed post pre-application.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? I just have one. Why did you decide to break it into 2 phases?
Basically, the site lends itself to that concept. With the connection between Quail Glen and Fawn Lane, that was a pretty nice connection, 12%, it was,
Yep.
right on those. So, and then in discovering the slope to the south didn't lend to the extension of Seventh to intersect with that street, it naturally broke into two separate areas. And with the thought process being that the utility system would be a whole for the whole site. But this way it lends to a little bit of diversity as far as doing a little bit different design on the north of the north, basically for slope and vegetation retention. And then the south, maybe increasing the density a little more to be closer to in between the minimum and maximum R1 allowed size lots.
I'm just curious because you have an easement running right through, it looks like both phases, but you're also saying you're gonna do all the utility improvements throughout. So I was just curious how that would even work in two phases, but it sounds like you got it.
I think so. I think the utility plan packet is a good start to showing that that's very feasible. And then we'll proceed from those initial design drawings, getting into the engineered design and coordinate all that between the civil engineer and the city engineer.
All right, thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely, thank you.
And this time we move on to public testimony. Yep. All right, we'll now move to public testimony. Before you make your, please sign in with your name and address. We only have 3 speaker request forms right here. If anybody else would like to sign up, please do so now. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. Provide any written materials you wish to be part of the official record to the recording secretary, which I guess would be you tonight. So at this time, does anybody wish to speak on the application?
So Susie already spoke, but signed up. Did you want to speak again?
No, sir,
You
just
good?
wanted to make sure that I was
All right,
official.
covered. So just ask if there's anybody else in favor of the application I'd like to speak.
Yeah. Anyone in favor of the application that would like to speak at this time? Anyone neutral would like to speak this time?
Good one, sign up for neutral. Matt Kellum?
Kelly?
Yeah. Some questions for consideration.
You can state your name and city of residence.
Yes, my name is Matt Kellum, and I live here in Philomath on North 7th. You're a pioneer on North 7th. And I guess my whole theme of questions here tonight is about connectivity, right? From our North 7th into the subdivision and the certain conditions that might be needed to be met or upgraded from the end of North 7th services, sewage services, to the subdivision, how that all connects and what that looks like underground. In my historical experience with my own sewage connection to the main line, it seems like it was very outdated just on my connection alone with my neighbor, which was, seen as part of a service we needed several years ago. So kind of extrapolating that condition up to the end, the termination of North 7th, I'd be curious to see what the conditions would be needed to be met to facilitate a whole new subdivision connecting to the main sewage line, if that makes sense. Also, as far as connectivity goes for stormwater control and the facilities proposed to control stormwater, there is the clearly laid out tree removal plot, which was great to see, very resolved there. I didn't see any information on, and I don't know if this is required, any wildlife species inhabitants survey. Some of those trees are very old up there. I'm not sure which ones are the proposed removal and if those are the older growth trees or not, but in my experience, there may be potential inhabitants, roost areas with bats or flying squirrels, which we do have here in the Northwest. also other species of concern that might be sensitive to removal. I'd be curious if there's any room for survey work done on land there to resolve any inhabitants of sensitive species. And as far as the phases of development goes, again, with the connectivity, the services, city services run into the main sewage line on North 7th. My question around landslide sensitivity kind of goes into those terms of like the slight potential for landslide outside of the development plots, and what could be potentially done to preempt and bolster the conservation plantings that could be an aid of stabilizing the land upon the development. If anything could be looked into there to just broaden the scope of each plot on the greater slope, the geography there, to prevent or preempt any of those marginal potentials for landslide, that'd be comforting for myself and others, I think. And let's see here. The other question I had for the street and road conditions that currently connect, North 7th from Pioneer up to the dead end in the proposed subdivision. That's currently a chip seal, kind of loose street condition, and it's just run into a lot of degradation with the traffic that's there now. And with the potential increased traffic going from Pioneer up to the subdivision, I guess I'd want to resolve the conditions that would be needing to be met to improve the street conditions overall, so there isn't, an increased degradation of the street, and what conditions would necessitate an update or an upgrade of the street quality. What would that look like, and when would that needing to take place? Is it just a public, comment on like, oh, our roads are degrading further now, or who is looking out for that connectivity from Pioneer to the subdivision, because it's in the gray area of exempt coverage and upgrades currently. That's most of what I was concerned with, just to resolve a little more development, but I'd love to see all the details laid out so far. Thank you.
Great.
That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Do you guys want to do responses now, or do you want to continue public testimony?
We can hear from the public first.
Yeah. Okay.
Ask just one more time if there's anybody neutral.
Yeah.
We'll go back and forth.
Anybody neutral? Any more comments? Okay. Then one opposed, Gianna Bernardini. Can you please just state your name and your city or residence?
My name is Gianna Bernardini. I live on North 7th Street, a couple blocks down from the proposed development area. And let me begin by saying that I recognize that we desperately need more housing in Philomath. And I don't oppose development, including in my own backyard. I don't believe that the addition of what will be 11 new houses in that cul-de-sac up the road will meaningfully impact my neighborhood or street or home in any way. So, I also worked with Joe Sullivan on the Planning Commission when we were planning commissioners a few years ago. And I found him to be a person of integrity and vision and intelligence, and respected very much. And nothing would make me happier than to offer my wholehearted support to the future. Unfortunately, I can't. We do need housing, but I believe that where we build it matters, and all not not all land is created equal in this regard. There's a big difference between putting a subdivision on the site of a former mill than there is putting a subdivision on previously undeveloped ground. The topography of these 7 acres that we're talking about is deeply weird. It's incredibly steep, it's rugged, it's all convoluted, which is, I'm sure, why it hasn't been developed previously. It's a tough site. Being inaccessible, though, is why it has become an island of biodiversity within our city limits. Those few acres contain some big trees. This is not a bunch of scrub. This is not just a bunch of blackberries and ash spoil, although there's blackberries in there for sure. We're not talking about just a few unfortunate casualties like, oh, some of these trees are gonna have to go, what a shame. I would direct you to pages 162 to 166 in the design application, in the development application. Their arborist did a very thorough reckoning of every single tree on the site that will have to be removed and those that will stay. And there's a quote there that says, the total area within the project limits is 7.4 acres. Of this, 6.4 acres will be sufficiently impacted by the development that vegetative cover cannot be preserved. Okay, so we're talking about 6 out of 7 acres are going to be demolished vegetation-wise. That's 246 trees gone. And again, these are not small trees. Some of these are huge. We're talking about an oak, 3.5-foot diameter oak. There's a maple that's 6 feet in diameter. 6 feet in diameter. That is massive. That specific maple is not supposed to be impacted by this development. That one will be spared. There are 26-inch apple trees. A diameter of 26 inches on an apple tree. How many of you have seen a 2-foot diameter apple? That is an old, old tree. There are redwoods, there are 30-inch maples, there are sequoias, all kinds of trees in there that are over 2 feet in diameter or around a 2-foot diameter. That tells us that this patch of land is old. Those trees have been there for a long time. This is an old ecosystem. If you cut these trees, you better have some incredible engineering to hold up slopes that are 20% or greater. Because when those roots that have been holding that soil degrade, I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm saying right now those trees are holding that hillside up. Get rid of those and God only knows what's gonna happen. I'm sure humans can find a way around that. I'm just saying it's not gonna be easy. I want to speak quickly to the notion about the oaks. Oak trees in particular, of which there are many in this plot, would be taken out. Oaks harbor more species within them, on them, underneath them than any other tree. Cutting a really old oak tree, that is a catastrophic loss for species from the top to the bottom. We're talking about fungi and bacteria up through insects, mosses, lichens, amphibians, the whole gamut. It's a grave issue to cut down an old oak tree. So please, I'm asking us to think about this hard. Not all of the species that live in that 7 acres are what they call charismatic. A lot of them are things that people don't care about or even particularly like. But all of them have a role to play in a thriving, developed ecosystem. Again, from the mosses, the grasses, to the mammals. I lie in bed at night and I hear owls. I hear owls hooting, and that's where they are. The fawns, the baby fawns, that's where they're resting during the day while their mothers are out foraging. The turkeys, I know some people hate them, a lot of people hate them, some people love them, but that's also where they roost. That's where the tree frogs are, that's where the Cooper's hawks are, that's where the ground nesting bees are. Those old trees that decay and big limbs lay there, that's the nesting habitat. This is crucial. That is such a crucial piece of habitat for the woodpeckers, everything, tree frogs, I can go on and on. If we develop this land, all of that goes away. And this is how we get endangered species. It's habitat loss. Endangered species are created by habitat loss, 1 acre at a time. This is exactly how we do it. This is how we've gotten to where we are. I love living here. I chose to live here because of this environment. If we want to live in a rural community and not a suburb where the only nature that we have are manicured lawns and topiary shrubs, then we need to fight for the preservation of the very few wild spaces we have left. This parcel is a jewel right in the middle of our city limits. It's a refuge. It's a little pocket sanctuary for nature. It's precious and it is rare. It is where our wild things are and it is worth keeping. If we cut it down and we pave it over, it's gone forever. 26 houses, it's not worth it.
We looked at that.
Ask one more, Pat, if there's any other opposed.
Any other opposed testimony?
I don't think they heard that.
Is there any other opposed testimony? No, then I think at this time we allow for the applicant to respond. Correct?
Yep.
The applicant want to respond to the opposed testimony?
Any of the testimony?
Any?
Do we have a minute to confirm?
Sure.
We're gonna take it. I'll be right back.
Why don't we go ahead and just take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break.
900-foot cul-de-sac, you mean we can have statements in our code that says this is the maximum number, but then say we can allow a variance to be a different number. So anything, even though it says it's required, or the amount is required, 600 feet that's all it can be. But so anything we have in here that says it's required, we can essentially by variance allow something else.
Michael.
Okay, so, and I'll add other context. So in that section, it's talking about things that are not defined as a dead-end street. So local street, collector, arterial, the standards apply to those when it comes to a great context. A dead-end street, not defined in that, is a cul-de-sac. And that's where there's specific language in 1880-0.020 that specifically identify for the provisions for a dead-end street, where without any public works approval, they can have up to 325 feet distance for the dead-end street. 325 to 600 would require approval from the public works director. When it exceeds 600 feet, then that's where the variance would come into play. And the specific variance that was applied to this was to address those, because there's very four prescriptive things that would allow a dead-end street to connect. So those are, I know, I understand what you said, but in the code, those are talking two different pieces.
They're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
It's saying a block can't be more than 600 feet. So you're saying this variance will allow a 900-foot block.
It wouldn't be considered a block in that sense because it's a dead-end street. That's what I'm trying to say. Dead-end street is treated differently because that's talking about streets that are in a network, not a dead-end street. And I've had to scour this quite a few times and had many conversations with the city engineer on this back and forth with some discussions of that was where the line is at. Could that all be there in a section? Would it be helpful for me? Yeah, it would be helpful not having two different sections, but like, coming in as a newer planner, it's like you can't rock it until you've seen how all the pieces play, and then say, okay, what if we put this in this section? How does that change? But yeah, I've had to divorce those two when I was doing my evaluation, because you can't apply a dead-end street to something that's defining a street network, which I know it's like you have to get into the engineering weeds to be able to get it. So that's why I had to consult with the engineer.
I'll let him go with that for now, and then I'll talk some more
When we
public hearing.
The staff wish to respond to any question or issue that was raised by the testimony received.
I've got 3 points that I'll touch on real quick. And it got touched on a little bit, but I just want to clear from the city standpoint. The wildlife study, as we heard, it's not required in the area. If you live in the county, they often do require wildlife studies and environmental protection studies. Once you're inside of an urban growth boundary, those studies aren't required prior to development. And so it's not a requirement. You know, the state of Oregon says cities have to grow, and you have to grow within this urban growth boundary. And before that urban growth boundary is established, there are a lot of studies done to show what impact that urban growth boundary is going to have on endangered species and the environment and all those. And those are all taken into consideration before that urban growth boundary gets set. Once urban growth boundary gets set, the expectation is the land within there is going to develop. The exception to that is the city has a parks and trails master plan where we identify specific areas in town that are going to be preserved for parks and open space. And so if a development comes in and it's identified on our park master plan for an area that's going to have a future park, then we would approach the developer and say the city's going to purchase X amount of space for a future park or for park preservation. That isn't the case here. There is no planned park up here for North 7th Street. And so we're following, this application essentially is in line with the city's requirements. It's also in line with the Parks and Trails Master Plan. 7th Street road improvements, the question was posed, was answered well, and who's keeping track of when North 7th Street has to be fully improved, sidewalks and asphalt and all that. I can tell you Public Works does monitor that. They're very aware of the condition of North 7th Street. you have to be a little bit careful what you wish for there, because oftentimes the street will do some of the improvement, but then we're gonna look to the neighbors to do a portion of improvements as well. We tried to do some improvements on North 11th Street, and the neighborhood was adamantly opposed to those improvements, because they were gonna have to pay for some of the sidewalk work and other things, and they weren't happy about that, so the city didn't do any improvements on North 11th Street because they listened to the neighbors up there. So be a little careful what you wish for there, but we do monitor it. We do make sure that chip seal gets done every so often to keep it, in good condition, keep it from going all the way back to gravel. And that'll continue. I was kind of heard, 11 additional houses aren't going to provide a lot of extra traffic there, but with the new traffic, especially construction traffic, we'll be going back in there to do some more chip sealing and keeping that, as nice as we can. For the time being, but Public Works is who monitors that, keeps track of that. All of the cities in the street are known to Public Works, and they keep an eye on what needs to be. And the last thing I do want to bring up as a point of procedure more than application is the type B variance for the street. It is a separate variance that goes through. The code does allow for variances. They're very specific to what you can get a variance for. It's not anything in the code, but there's a list of specific things that you can request a variance on. The length of a road or a block is one of those things. It does typically require, if you're just doing the variance on its own, it's a type, it's a little technical here, but I want to make sure it's clear to the Planning Commission as far as procedure go. Type V or type B variance is a type 2 administrative decision. It doesn't typically come to the Planning Commission, but because it's being submitted as part of this development, if they don't have the subdivision, they don't need the variance, right? So as part of the subdivision application, in reviewing the application, it was determined that that road was more than the 600 feet, that cul-de-sac, and so the variance was needed. And so it's been added into this application. The city staff did not do like an additional notification to the neighbors like we would typically do for a type 2. If we were just doing the variance, we would do a letter to 250-foot radius and give them 2 weeks to provide comments to the city staff, and then city staff would write a report and issue a decision. There wouldn't be a public hearing, there wouldn't be public notice per se to like the general public. For this, meaning for a subdivision, it's a type 3 application, and so it gets notice to the neighborhood. Is it 250 as well, or is it extended out? So 250-foot radius of the subdivisions going in. That notice went out to all of the neighbors. There was a picture of the subdivision with the road, the length that it's going to be, the 900 feet. So that all got submitted as a subdivision. It wasn't until later that it was determined that the variance would be needed as well. So we didn't do a separate mailing then after that to let them know the variance was needed. We're kind of grouping it in with the subdivision application without an additional notification to the neighbors, assuming that if they're interested in the subdivision, if they're interested or have concerns, that they're going to be here tonight because everybody's been invited to be here. So that is a little bit of change from procedure, that we're not handling them separate. We're combining the two and running them concurrent. And so you'll see that those were some of the changes made in the staff report that came before you tonight. And the recommended rules have that language as well, that it's really the subdivision plus the type 2 variance, and in addition to that, then you've got the erosion control permit as well. Excuse me, the slope permit that goes with it. So it's 3 different procedures really being combined into one. And I want to make sure the Planning Commission is comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable with that procedurally, then the recommendation from staff would be to continue the hearing to a date, time certain, 3 weeks from now or so, 3-4 weeks from now. And we would send out a new notice to all of the neighbors in the 250 feet and tell them just about the variance, type 2. We'd give them 2 weeks to give us input. We'd make a decision, and we'd come back and continue the hearing, letting you know that we've essentially, more than likely, based on the analysis in the staff report, that we've approved that variance, and then can move forward with the hearing with just the subdivision and the slope permit. So procedurally, we're fine. We've talked to the city attorney on this. She's comfortable with the procedures going through it. It's really just if the commission's comfortable with that. We've not really heard a lot of concerns raised from the public tonight about the length of that. There's been other concerns raised, but The length of the road hasn't been one of them we heard from the public. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable going forward, but I want to just get that out there and give the commission the option to slow things down if we need to, if you feel like the public needs that extra time, or if you feel like the public hearing we're having tonight is sufficient notification of the neighbors and whatnot. So those are my 3 items.
I want to add one more thing on that. It was the discussion over Dead End Street and the definition. So this was a back and forth between Denny and I, where it's like, what is the scope? Is this broad brush, or is it combined to within the subdivision? And in that discussion, with both of us digging and learning, there was no way around. The definition was broad brushed. So we have to go through this way, but this was a city induced limitation. So this is where it's a little different, where it's like we're telling them, no, you can't connect it because of the slope concerns to meet Oregon State Fire Code and Public Works Design Standards that led us to this situation.
So that is a little bit weird procedurally, because we kind of have to decide now before we close the public hearing. We don't have a continuance. So does everybody feel comfortable, or does anybody want a continuance?
Well, I was gonna suggest we have a continuance to, because we don't have in front of us any of the new conditions of approval that staff reported on tonight. I would like to see it before I vote on it.
Right there, they're on the stuff.
We provide it. So and
You changed, this is what you changed.
yeah, this is the updated change.
Well, I obviously haven't had a chance to read it tonight, so I will ask for a continuance so that we can. And furthermore, this thing of not mailing or sending out whatever the application is I don't like it at all. Trying to go back and forth on the computer and on our ordinances is impossible. And so next time we have anything like that, so I am going to insist on, if it's 500 pages, I want all 500 pages on it. I'm guaranteed I don't know everything.
Is the city able to print on 11 by 17? Colored?
Yeah, I believe that was offered in the email. If you want a hard copy or you need larger, we're more than happy to provide that.
Well, I was gonna try it, but I'm just saying that.
Yeah, that's how I went about it too, and it was, I'm not as in tune with computers as I used to be, and it was awkward, but.
So any of the ones in the future, yeah, it's like when that notice goes out, if you want to print a copy, just go ahead and respond back, and I'll make sure either be Crystal or I, they'll get that prepared and sent to you, or available for pickup.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay. So there is a request for continuance. Either written or oral testimony from Van. So the planning commission can either continue the hearing or hold the record open as described. If the planning commission decides to continue the hearing, establish the meeting date and time to continue the hearing at least 7 days after this hearing date. And the continuance hearing shall be held in the same manner as this hearing, but shall be limited to issues related to the new documents or evidence for which the continuance was requested, which, Van, I suppose would be limited to the scope of the changes which are highlighted in the new document.
Well, yeah. I mean, we haven't done any deliberation, so I still have all the things I want to talk about that.
Yeah, so we're just talking about the continuance. Is there then a request to hold the record open? I don't think we have one from the public.
If I can just jump in on this whole discussion here, if that's all right. Typically I think you're following the script, and that's complete. I appreciate that. The script is for continuance requests from the public. If the commission itself would like to just voluntarily continue the hearing, then you can just entertain a motion to continue the hearing to a date and time certain, say that date and time certain, and then make that motion. If you would like to keep the record open or hold a de novo hearing, you can also say that, or you can clarify what your intent is for that subsequent hearing.
Thank you. So Ann, would you like to make a said motion?
When's next month's regular meeting?
Be the 19th, I believe.
May 19th?
Anybody wants to meet before that?
Well, I wanna, so your concern on, I just wanna make sure I've got it right, so I can then guide on the date and time if we go down that rabbit hole.
Well, we
Is
had,
the concern that there wasn't a notice sent on the variance, and then we would need to have that flush its course out for the schedule? Or is there other extraneous?
well, no, just the stuff that's in here, the new stuff that you did this afternoon. I mean, we probably shouldn't even have a meeting as far as I'm concerned.
Followed along
There's
with
only,
the
there's only
conversation.
2 additional conditions of approval that were added, number 21 and number 22, and the new one given to you. And both of them were talked about during the staff report.
And then, so, yeah, like I say, well, if you want to, I'll go through this stuff tonight, but we'll be here a while. If you want to not continue it. I mean, I do have a lot. So if you'd rather just do it, I'm fine with that too. I won't make a motion.
No motion.
We'll just stay here this evening for a while.
Okay. So there is no motion for continuance. Is there a public request for a continuance?
Yes.
Then is it up to the commission or city to determine that?
So if the request for continuance, you want to just leave the record open for time certain to provide additional testimony?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can do one other, I mean, just leave the record open for 7 days. Additional written testimony could be submitted.
Yeah.
And then we'll just need to set a date after that for the planning commission to come back and discuss, or you can still choose to leave the hearing open. People can still submit written testimony, or they can come prepared with additional testimony, meeting. And we can continue the hearing at that time. I mean, either way, it sounds like we're gonna be coming back for a second meeting on this, so it's just a matter if you wanna limit the additional hearing to written testimony between now and the record's closed, or if you wanna leave that open all the way to and through the following meeting for additional testimony.
What do you prefer?
It'd be nice if there could be additional testimony.
Written, or do you want to come speak again?
I'll write something, but I know some folks who wanted to come tonight, but couldn't.
Okay.
And so it might be another opportunity.
Okay, then we should probably hold the record. So then proceeding. We can still proceed into deliberation even though the record's not closed. Is that correct, Ashley?
So at this stage, if someone I believe I heard that someone requested to leave the record open, then I would recommend continuing the hearing at this stage. And just, choose one of your 2 options, which is either to leave the record open and allow written comments, or simply continue the public hearing, and allow additional evidence and testimony.
I guess I would suggest the latter.
Yeah.
Based on what she said.
So I don't really know what to do now. We want to continue the public hearing, but at a later date, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Declare the date and then adjourn?
So we can leave it open. It's got to be at least 7 days. I think the question that Michael has is if you want to wait the 7 days, we're still going to have the issue of the variance not getting an additional notification to those 2 neighbors within 250 signatures. If you want to go more than the 2 weeks, and that gives time to get that notice out tomorrow, I guess we could get a notice out, get it mailed.
If
And that would
if I
take
can
2 weeks to go through and get all that done, but go ahead.
If I can make a procedural suggestion, when would your next planning commission hearing just naturally be, your next public meeting? Would it be in
May 19th.
a month from now, May 19th?
Yeah, a month from today, May 19th.
Great, so a month from today. So to me, what sounds like the easiest option to address the request for continuance and then also any potential concerns you would have would just be to continue this public hearing till your next public meeting and allow any additional evidence or testimony, unless you don't want oral testimony at that hearing, just allow any additional evidence or testimony to be submitted between now and that date. And then just hear all three applications concurrently on that date in May.
I think the public would prefer that we have oral testimony on that date, so I think we should move forward under that assumption. And is everyone on the commissioners, are you guys okay with continuing a month from now, or would you?
I'm not gonna be in the state of Oregon.
Not available, okay.
Yeah.
So then it really depends on Tim to even get a quorum.
It won't be available. So John, maybe. John would have to read everything, all the testimony that's been provided up to this point. I mean, it'd really be good to identify this body, a time that this body can come together again, so we're not having to backtrack and the applicant's getting a decision from everybody who's been involved in the hearing process up to this point.
So how about 3 weeks from now? A week before our next scheduled meeting?
The 12th is a city council meeting, but we could do the Tuesday after that, the 13th, if a Tuesday evening works for people.
May 13th. When you leaving, Darlene?
On the 16th, so May 13th is possible.
That works for me.
That'd be fine.
Same.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and get a motion on the table to continue the hearing through till May 13th. Meet at 6 p.m.
Do we need a motion? I think I could just declare it, can I?
I recommend making a motion.
Motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
I make a motion to continue the public hearing until May 13th and allow any additional evidence and testimony at that time. I'd also add that a request for city staff to send out a notice about the variance to the 250 feet worth of neighbors, so they're aware of the variance that is part of this application.
I second that motion.
Anything else you guys can think we should amend onto the motion? That's very good. All in favor?
Okay.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay. Then I guess we adjourn for the evening, correct?
I think there was a staff report.
Oh, would you like to go through the staff report?
You can,
Oh,
you're welcome to, but you also could just have this, any other material at your next meeting in May, if you prefer. It's up to you.
Staff report in May, so maybe let's give,
Thank everyone in the public for providing testimony.
All right, I will try to make this super. We did make a decision on an application for a type 2 site development review for 4-5 plexes on the northwest corner of South 19th and Chapel Drive. We received the type 2 modification to approve base changes for Mill Pond Crossing. The public comment period ended on March 10th and is awaiting final sign off for the staff. And then held a neighborhood meeting for, the neighbors at Mill Pond Crossing there on the west side of 16th Street regarding outstanding issues in the foster conversation regarding the adjustment of lot lines as previously proposed on April 7th. I got a voicemail message today that the one linchpin to make it where all this can go through finally got settled. So we will be making progress on getting those lot lines adjusted over the next few weeks. We received an application for subdivision. Oh wait, that shouldn't even be that. That's this one. And that one's for this one. Let's got out of there. Okay. And then OCW COG will be attending the May 19th Planning Commission meeting to go over the walkability.
Can you please hold conversation until we're done? You guys are gonna get picked up on the microphone.
Yeah, we
You got
can't
anything
hear.
more, Michael?
We can't hear. The microphone's picking up that conversation.
How much did it? Should I just start over?
No,
Okay. Building department. OCW COG will be attending the May 19th Planning Commission meeting to go over the walkability audit and present that to the Planning Commission. And as for things with me, Philomath entered an agreement with the city of Monroe to provide planning services, which I'll be doing on Tuesdays for the foreseeable future, in addition to Adair Village on Wednesday. And that is it for the staff.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Adjourned.
Have a good night.